We're here to talk with Marc Levinson, author of The Box, How the Shipping Container Made the World Smaller and the World Economy Bigger. Why was trade so difficult before the container then?
Well, place yourself on a dock back in the early 1950s, loading a ship. What you would have seen on that dock was piles of cargo. Cardboard cartons, wooden crates, barrels, coils of steel, bales of cotton, and each of these individual pieces had to be trucked to the dock or taken by rail to the dock, had to be lifted off the truck or the rail car, had to be stored, had to be taken to the dock, had to be put into the ship, had to be taken out of the ship. It was a very, very labor-intensive business, and so it was hugely costly. What the container did was get rid of all that. At the factory or at the warehouse, all the goods could be put into the container. The container could be shifted from a truck to a train to a ship back to a train, could be delivered to a factory or a warehouse or right to a retail store. So it just cut out all of that cost. But before the container came along, a typical ship would tie up at a dock and it might spend a week there or more than a week. A ship in the 1950s often had more than 200,000 items of cargo, each of which had to be loaded individually. So this was a seriously expensive and time-consuming project, and it really discouraged people from engaging in trade.
Now, the transformation couldn't have taken place overnight. The first container ship leaves in 1956.
That's correct.
How long did it take before container shipping really took off, and what kind of obstacles did it face in the interim?
Well, putting cargo into a container actually wasn't a new idea. It had been around since the end of the 19th century. And what people gradually discovered is that just putting cargo into a box by itself didn't really save anything, because you still had to do something with the box. And so in the early days, the box would be treated just like another one of those cartons and bags and bales and somehow lowered into the ship and put away. It really took the development of a whole system around the container. Ships designed to handle containers, cranes designed to handle containers, trucks that were designed to properly handle these containers quickly. This took until really the early 1970s. The late 1960s saw the growth of container shipping to Europe from the United States, saw the first transatlantic and then trans-Pacific container shipping. And then by the 1970s, this whole thing was really starting to get routine. You started to have trains that were dedicated to carrying containers, and it really became a worldwide system so that you could pack a container full anywhere and ship it through any port on any ship and get it unloaded anywhere in the world. But that took a good 20 years, 15 to 20 years before it was completely done.
Given all that, too, then why don't you tell us something about Malcolm McLean, who was the iconoclast, the business maverick who saw all of this take off? It was his idea that led to container shipping. Well,
you actually had two independent developments that led to container shipping. McLean was one. McLean was a trucker from North Carolina who started out with a single truck in the Great Depression and had built the third biggest trucking company in the country by the early 50s. And he was always looking for ways to save money. Well, after the war, he saw that the roads were congested. The cost of running his trucks on these roads was going to go up as congestion increased. And so he hit upon this idea of maybe rolling his trucks onto a ship and taking the ship down the coast and taking the trucks off the ship at the other end. This was something that had been tried out during the war, so people knew how to do it technologically. What was radical for the United States was that one guy proposed to own the trucks and the ships, because we had this whole regulatory system that kept these things separate. So McLean got going, and pretty soon he dropped the idea of putting trucks on ships because all of the wheels just take up space without generating any revenue. So he said, let's just take the back off the truck, just take the trailer off the truck and put it on a ship. And that's what became the container. Then you had a group out on the West Coast at Matson Steamship, Matson Navigation Company, which was looking into the container too. But they did it from an entirely different viewpoint. McLean was a very intuitive sort of guy. He said, here's an idea, let's run with it, get it done. And he'd hire brilliant people and they'd get it done. The people out at Matson were very cautious, very careful. They spent several years studying the container. They came up, they hired one of the early experts in operations research to run equations about the best way to have containers and the most cost-effective way to do this and how big their containers should be. And so it took them several years to get their containers actually on ships, whereas McLean, from inception, had his ships at sea within 2 years.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Thanks, Steve.